Is reading the Fatiha reading the whole Quran, and is that what people mean when they say they read the whole Quran in Ramadan during Ramadan?
Generally, no, that is not what they mean. The Quran is broken into what they call parts. They call them Jews, like Juz.
Jews. Copy
Yeah,
that.
yes. And in everything that I say, I'm going to send you up some reference material. So,
Copy that.
so,
Thank you.
so the Quran has a number of chapters. The recitation of the Quran is done in a certain way. You asked about the poetry. It's not necessarily poetic. It's beyond the poetry of even the time of the ignorant Arabs in terms of the days of Jahiliyyah, the ignorance.
Okay.
They were very into poetry. And poetry is a way of refined communication. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Like it can
Yes.
it
Yes.
can penetrate the heart, in other words.
Yes.
One of the beautiful things about the Quran and the recitation of the Quran is that it was revealed from Allah to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so if you could think about the days of these so-called Arabs having a great appreciation for the fine recitation of poetry, well, one of the proofs that the Quran was supreme is because whatever they were able to produce could not be matched by what the prophet brought through the revelation.
Mm.
It's kind of like you have something sweet and then somebody brings something that is much more sweeter than what you have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was wisdom that has always been in the world. You know what I mean? You can find
Yep.
wisdom everywhere.
Everywhere.
But what happens when you get supreme wisdom?
Oh,
The supreme
diabetes.
the supreme wisdom supersedes the wisdom that is known, respected, and appreciated because it comes from an even higher source. The information or the wisdom that we have is directly from Allah. That's why it's called supreme wisdom. However, when you think
Mm.
about the Quran, whatever was available in terms of the books, in terms of the wisdom, in terms of how they were reciting poetry, when the revelation came through the prophet, it superseded anything they had ever experienced, period.
Mm.
The light was so bright, it was brighter than anything that they ever had. And that's why in the Quran it says, if you could bring a verse better than this, do it, but you can't do it because you will never be able to do it.
It says that. That's not an interpretation. It
It's not
says that.
it. I will send you a reference
Copy
to,
that.
to
Copy
that
that.
to that as well. The Quran is the light. It is the proof that Allah exists because everything that this world has and everything that it functions on, it cannot supersede what is found in that Quran. That book is the book of books. There's no book greater. You're not going to find a book where over 1 billion people are reciting that book. Even right now, that book is being recited somewhere. That the sounds of that book are taking place constantly and continuously forever across this planet right now.
Yep.
The Fatiha, which you mentioned, which is the opening of the book, it's being recited somewhere right now continuously on this planet. This is a miracle of the Quran because the Quran is always recited through the creation somewhere on the planet right now. Someone is making salat or someone is reading the Fatiha, someone is reciting the Quran, and in that is the recognition that Allah is the Most High. That's a miracle. Okay. And so what
Wow.
happens is in Ramadan is going to last 29 or 30 days, right?
Right.
Depending on the sighting of the moon. And so what happens is during Ramadan, there are those, and this is not required. There are obligations in Islam, like your 5 prayers. There's an obligation that you fast during Ramadan if you're able, but then there are ways that you can have relief from that if you're traveling or if you're ill or if you can't or you're mentally incapacitated.
Right.
If
Right.
you
Right.
if you can't fast, then you can feed someone.
Right.
But also remember, if you break your fast because Allah is merciful, beneficent, and merciful, it's not a religion or a way of life that is loaded with punishment.
Yes, I came
It
across that reading. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really a way of life that is rooted in mercy and forgiveness and grace and all of those attributes. So say for example you were fasting Ramadan and you found yourself eating. You wouldn't say, "Dang, I broke my fast. I'm a horrible person." You would say, "Allah just fed me and
Ah,
now
okay,
I'm going to
okay.
continue with my fast." Like if you ate unconsciously, if you drank
Right,
unconsciously,
right.
you wouldn't punish yourself. "Oh, dang, dang, dang." You're like, "Allahu Akbar." And then you
Like I
get
almost
back on
gave
your
Rahman a
fast.
cup of water when he was coughing. I almost gave him a cup of water. Then I remembered.
Yeah. And so
Yeah, yeah.
but remember, even if he had a cup of water, he could because he's traveling.
Ah, right.
But
Yeah.
those who take it on a larger level could say that the Negro in North America who was taken from his home,
It's traveling.
we're always traveling. We are away from home.
Woo!
So
Oh, that is so peaceful.
just by that very virtue, we are under the protection of Allah because we are not at home. We're always traveling.
Dang.
We are captives. You know what I mean? We are seeking
That's deep.
freedom. And the freedom that we're seeking is the only freedom that can come from Allah. Abraham
Right,
Lincoln cannot give you freedom.
right.
No matter how much people want to celebrate Juneteenth, the white man cannot give you what he doesn't even have. The white man does not have freedom. Allah is the one that gives us freedom. And that's what we're seeking. And so in the Quran, this is not an obligation, but these are what they call either sunnah or acts that you do on your own. Like, for example, you pray 5 times a day, but you could pray 10 times a day. The other 5 are just not obligatory. They're like
Right,
you're
right,
you're
right.
you're enhancing what you have. And so during Ramadan, but also throughout the year, there are individuals that recite the Quran. They don't sing it, they don't do the poetry of it. It's recited in a certain way, which just means to make it sweet. You know,
Aha! And that's what I'm being attracted to, the way they make it sweet.
it's sweet. It's penetrating your heart. You know,
Right.
it's not crass. It's on a higher vibration. It's on the highest
Yeah,
frequency. And
yeah.
individuals who learn how to play the trumpet, the flute, the violin, the piano, they're doing things on higher levels, higher octaves. And so if you can imagine, if man created those instruments, imagine what Allah created and the frequency that Allah has in terms of his recitation or his sound or his vibration. And I don't want to say his as if it's a
Right,
man
right. I
or a
understand
person,
that.
but
Right.
Allah is
Understood.
Allah, Allahu Akbar. You know what I mean? And so
Yes.
when individuals are reciting the revelation of the Quran, there's no higher frequency on the planet because those come directly from Allah.
Understood.
And so what happens is the Quran, for the sake of Ramadan or for any period of time, it's broken down into parts called Juz, Juz. And every night of Ramadan, many Muslims are either reading one part a day or they're reciting one part a day. And then the next day they're reciting another part. And then the next day they're reciting another part. One part or one juz is breaking that Quran into fractions. And if you did one part a day, you will have read or recited the entire Quran.
Oh my gosh.
But
And it's,
if you think about the individual who has committed the Quran to their memory
I know.
or just reads the Quran, you could break that down into I read the Quran in its entirety every 29 days. Then there are those who break it down into 7 days. So it's just mathematics. Islam is mathematics and mathematics is Islam. And so however you think of time, you can use a mathematical equation to recite that entire Quran based on your mathematical theology. So if you said, I want to break this down and I want to read the Quran in its entirety in 2 days, then you would read half of it one day and you would read half of it the next day.
Right, right. Makes
If you wanted to
sense.
break that Quran down and do it in quarters, in 4 days, you would read a quarter of it in one day. You would read another quarter, which would make you halfway done in the second day. In the third day, you would read another quarter, which means that you're 3/4 done. And then on the fourth day, you would complete it because you broke it down into quarters. And that's why when you look at the moon, you can also see every day you looked at that moon, there was another part that was added to it. When you looked at it, there was a crescent that was on one side that was coming from the right when it appeared. And then when we were halfway done with Ramadan, it was a full moon, which showed that it was halfway done. Even though it was a full moon, it's just showing that the rotation is about to go into the next quarter, which is the third quarter. And now when you look into the sky, you know that Ramadan is completed, you're going to see a small sliver of the moon, which shows that another month has begun. You
That
can
was crazy watching that last month after you said that, Brother Jeff.
Well, you can correlate that with the Quran as well. However much you've read in the last month, you can see it. You could put a bookmark in your Quran and say, I've read this much today. And then when you read more, you say, I read this much today. I read this much today. I read this much today. And you will see yourself progressing through the Quran until, or any book, until you say, I've completed that book. And so
Mm.
the recitation or the reading of the Quran is just those who say, through Ramadan, I'm going to read 1/29th part of the Quran every day
Okay.
or every night or whenever you decide to read it until Ramadan is over. So there are those who have read the entire Quran in a month, but it's not obligatory. It's
Right. Understood.
voluntary. It's how you drive your own Islam.
Mm.
The way you drive your Islam is not the way I drive my Islam because it's individual. But we
Right.
we have some commonalities, which is Allahu Akbar. Allah is Allah.
The greatest.
Yes, and Muhammad is his messenger. You could look at Muhammad as a noun or Muhammad as a verb, or you can make it an adjective. It just all depends because it just means praise. Like when you're praising Allah, the way I can tell if you're praising Allah, and I'll personalize this, the way I could tell if I'm praising Allah is because I'm praying. All prayer is praising Allah. So the Arabic word is Hamd, Alhamdulillah, Ahmed, Muhammad. The root of that is just praise. And so you can mistakenly praise a messenger as an individual, or you can take the example of that messenger and do what that messenger was doing, which is showing you how to praise Allah through prayer. But that's not the
And that's
only
the
way.
verb.
Yes, that's not the
Oh,
only way
snap.
to praise Allah. You can praise Allah with a smile to someone else. You can praise Allah through teaching someone. You could praise Allah by feeding someone. You could praise Allah in a whole bunch of different ways, contributing your gifts and your talents. And it's obligatory for you to praise Allah in one of the fundamental principles of Islam, and that's salat, which means prayer. The way you can tell that you're away from Allah is when you stop praying, because it's a fundamental principle of the faith. You must pray. And so when you think about Ramadan, you were Muhammad. You were Muhammad. You were exhibiting the characteristics of Muhammad, which just meant you are praising. You are worshiping. You are Muhammad, one who is praising and praising much. And there's a lot of praise that takes place in Ramadan. The Quran is going to tell you there are many messengers that you know of and that you don't know of. You may not know the mailman that came to your house today and put the mail into your box. You might not know that individual, but you know that the message was delivered by someone, whether you know their name or you don't know their name. If you open up that letter, you got the message. And it doesn't
I ain't never
matter.
think of it as a verb before. That's beautiful.
It doesn't matter who gave you the message as long as the message is correct, and the correct message is Allahu Akbar. And so most people get caught up on who the postman was
Ah,
as opposed to what was the message that the postman delivered.
that's in the lesson.
Yes, because it doesn't say that Muhammad is Allah. It says Muhammad is the messenger of Allah.
That is some bomb stuff.
And so the Quran, when you open it, you have to open the Quran. You have to open it up to get the message of Allah. To learn about Allah, you have to open the Quran. That's why the Fatiha is the opening of the door. If you're not a Muslim, the door is closed to you. The blessing of Allah, the mercy of Allah, the beneficence of Allah is that Allah allowed you to open that door. Now, the opening is the Fatiha. That's what Fatiha means, the opening. And what is the first thing that the opening tells you? Allah. It tells you who Allah is. Allah. That's the first thing you're going to learn. Now, to get to the first part of your question, if you don't mind.
No, go right ahead, brother. I got 10 minutes. Take it all.
Now, to get to the first part of your question of, is the opening the entire Quran? Yes, because the seed of the Quran is Allah.
Is in the opening. Oh, okay. Is Allah. Oh, right. I got it. I'm listening. Go ahead.
The opening leads you to Allah, who is God. Well, excuse me, I don't even use that term God, because the Quran is going to tell you there is none like Allah. So if you attribute something to be like Allah, then it's not like Allah. So God is not Allah. Allah is Allah, because there's nothing like Allah. So you can't interpret God to mean Allah, because there's nothing like Allah. So there's no interpretation of Allah. So when you open the Quran, you're going to learn that Allah is Allah. And then it's going to break it down into characteristics of Allah. Well, tell me more about this Allah. Well, Huwa Rahman Rahim. Allah is Rahman Rahim. What is that? Beneficent and merciful. Allah will do things that you can't do or wouldn't do. Allah will forgive you for things that you will never forgive yourself for, or no one will forgive you for doing to them, but Allah can. And that's why I think, and I've been thinking about why Islam is so appealing to individuals who are incarcerated. I'm not talking about folks who have been illegally detained and incarcerated. I'm talking about people who have done heinous things, including murder and rape and every imaginable thing that you can imagine that keeps a person up at night because their conscience won't allow them to sleep. They can no longer be sane based on what they've done. They've killed their parent. They've killed their children. They've lied. They've pilfered. They've done all of these different things that you and I would say, I would never forgive you for that. But when you open that book, it says Allah is the most forgiving. In other words, I could do what you can't do for yourself, and society would never do for you. I will forgive everything you do except associating something else with me. It says that in the Quran. You can be forgiven for whatever you have done, no matter what it is, except associating a partner with Allah. That's the only thing that is unacceptable in that book that you open. And so to answer your question more succinctly, I want to say it like this. Yes, the entire Quran is in the Fatiha, or the opening, but the entire Quran is also in Allah. Everything in creation, the sun, the moon, the stars, everything is in Allah. Everything. And
there's no separation.
But there's nothing that Allah needs to complete Allah. Right?
Right.
And so here's an example, whether you think about it as a nation or an individual. And if you think about it in terms of 1400 years ago, and we know that Allah was not created 1400 years ago.
Right.
Allah has no birth record. There's no beginning and there's no ending, because there was no one there to mark the start of time. And there's no one here capable to mark the end of time. That's why Allah is the best knower, because you don't even know when your last breath will take place on this planet.
And we didn't know when we took our first breath.
And you don't know when you took your first breath.
Somebody else got to give
you.
us the message. Yeah, somebody else got to tell us.
Someone has to convey that message to you. Which
I
means
knew we were Muslims.
I'm sorry, I'm listening. Which means you're dependent and Allah is independent.
I knew we were Muslims sitting in that parliament.
Yes. And the reason you know is because after the parliament, everybody that was in the parliament went home at some point and had to eat something and went to sleep. If I catch you going to sleep or eating something, I will say that you are dependent upon food and you are tired. So you what? Need some sleep. Allah does not need a drink of water, a morsel of food, or a wink of sleep.
Oh my gosh, brother Jeff.
Does this make sense?
Man,
And
you
so
just don't know.
So if you think about 1400 years ago, those
Ooh.
folks that were steeped in darkness, triple darkness, received the light of Allah through a messenger who taught them the Quran or the revelation. This is why you could burn every book that is the Quran, and there would be individuals that could recite it from memory. They're not dependent on the book because it's been put on their heart.
Ooh.
Just because you have a book burning or a book banning, it does not eliminate the light of Allah, because Allah will have someone reciting exactly the same message that has been recited since the beginning of time, and that message is Allahu Akbar.
Oh, that's
And,
deep.
and so I'll end with this. Those Arabs were in a period called Jahiliyyah, steeped ignorance, where they were killing each other. They were burying their daughters alive. They were doing all manner of inhumanity to one another in the same way that the Negro does in North America right now. He's steeped in ignorance, but it's Allah's light that brought those individuals 1400 years ago into the light of humanity. There were individuals in the world that had the light of humanity. The Moors of Spain and others going through time, there's always individuals who have the light.
Right.
The blessing or the mercy of Allah was to give those individuals the light that they didn't have. And the blessing that the Negro in North America received in 1930 was someone who came and brought them the message and brought them into the light when the enemy had dropped them and steeped them in darkness. And now they have the light, which is rising. And those individuals who have abused the light that they have, it is extinguishing because they're partnering with the enemy. They're partnering against their own self because they want the material gain. And so on a deeper level, all the way to where you get to, I believe they say the smallest measurement that they were able to measure was the atom, or atom, however you want to see it, atom. I don't care how you see it or if you can see it. Atum.
Right.
Inside of that atum is everything that's inside of Allah.
Yep.
So when folks say that they are, high, they are high. They're just not the most high. When they say they are supreme, they are supreme. They're just not the most high supreme. When they say they're fast, they are fast. They're just not the fastest. When they say they're beautiful, they are beautiful. They're just not the most beautiful. And so, yes, inside of you right now is the same thing that's inside of the Quran, which is your message, because you are the Quran.
Right.
That's the atom inside of you. That is basically...
I gotta go back to work, brother Jeff. Dang.
That is basically saying Allahu Akbar. And I'll end with this. In the same way, everything in the Quran is expanded in its fullness, or the entire Quran was inside of you, which is Shabazz is the sperm that grew into your entire being right now. You were always fully inside of that right now.
Right. I get that.
You were always you were always who you were. And with that being said, assalamu alaikum.
That's deep. Walaikum salam, black man.